Hi everyone, today let's talk about Apple earnings, then we'll get into the calendars, then we'll get into the charts, as well as my results for the day and my thoughts going into tomorrow's session. If you like trading stocks and options and making money, definitely like and subscribe. I make videos like this every single day that the markets are open as well as Sundays, so make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Welcome to the Portfolio Bulletin. Let's get started. So Apple beat on earnings, but their guidance was a little bit weak, saying that they might not return to growth in the holiday quarter. Obviously, this is still a very strong company, and they still continue to make a lot of money. Earnings per share at $1.46 versus $1.39. Revenue, almost $90 billion, beating there. iPhone revenue, right in line. Mac revenue did miss a little bit. Interesting. iPad beat. Wearables just barely missed. Services revenue, right in line, just off by a little bit. And gross margins continue to be extremely high in that 45% range, just a little bit below expectations. The December quarter typically is quite a bit stronger. They were looking for guidance around $123 billion, which would be year-over-year growth of about 5%. It is the most important quarter, but based on the forward guidance, it does not seem like we're going to see growth. They say it should be similar to last year's revenue, so no guidance for growth this holiday quarter, and because of that, the stock did move down at least a little bit. This marks 4 consecutive quarters of decreasing revenues and slowing growth, not exactly what you would want to see from this big company. They did talk about things like the new M3 chips, which they have several variations of, and those are going into various Apple products, which is fairly encouraging. People do like to have more powerful devices and upgrading from current devices, which does drive revenue to some degree, but it's not as exciting as what we've seen from Apple in years past. They also mention here Apple Watch sales continue to shrink year over year, dropping by 3% on an annual basis. And China sales were also flat at $15 billion, which includes Hong Kong and Taiwan. They still have tons of cash on hand, $162 billion, and they did declare a 24-cent dividend. And they spent $25 billion last quarter repurchasing shares and paying out last quarter's dividend. Overall, good result, but not a great forecast, and it doesn't seem like Apple is going to be leading us to new highs. Moving over to the economic calendar, we had initial jobless claims coming in a little bit higher than expectations. Previous number also revised up. Interesting. Haven't seen that in a while. Factory orders better than expectations. Labor costs quite a bit lower than expectations, which is good. But we also saw the previous read revised up by 1%. Fed balance sheet selling off pretty substantially here, about $40 billion. Nice little move down. And this balance sheet has continued to move down quite steadily over the past year or so. Looking at tomorrow, we got Eurozone unemployment rate. We also have non-farm payrolls, participation rate, unemployment rate for the U.S., global composite PMI, global services PMI, ISM non-manufacturing employment, and ISM manufacturing PMI, as well as non-manufacturing prices. Tons of data coming out on the Friday session. The biggest one for me is going to be that unemployment rate. We're at 3.8%, which is still ticking up here slightly. Expectations is to be in line here with the previous read. And then you got non-farm payrolls. Previous one, 336. Current one forecasted at 188. These have come in hot pretty consistently for a while now. And if it comes in line, that might be a little boost for markets just because we see the jobs market starting to cool, which could calm down the Fed. Looking at the earnings calendar, lots of green across the board. We talked about Apple. They beat. Starbucks beating pretty substantially as well. Booking also beating quite well. Duke Energy missed on revenues but beat on earnings. And then Monster Beverage missed on revenues but beat on earnings. Then looking at the earnings for tomorrow, not much. Church & Dwight, dividend payer, lots of people like that company. Dominion Energy, fairly interesting. Microchip, also fairly interesting, but not much here for the Friday session. Moving over to Max Payne, currently sitting at $420, stock price up around $430, way higher than we thought. $430 I said was going to be the upside limit, and that is basically where we've stopped. Top of the puts right in that same range. $431 would be really the top, so maybe $1 potential for upside. Would not expect to close above $430 just because of how many calls are at that level. Total options 1.18 million. Put call ratio did tick up a little bit, almost to 2.5. Overall, still looks bullish. Looking for a close right at those highs of the puts, which indicates a little bit more bullishness going into next week, in my opinion. Moving over to the charts, you can see this parabolic run that we have been on the hourly chart touched that level at 410.54. Ended up holding that level, rallying super aggressively up to 431.71. Didn't quite get there, but we're in that range now. 428.59 is the level to the downside. It does seem like we're starting to lose a little bit of momentum in the shorter time frames. You can see this continued to tick down at the end of the day into the after hours. With Apple showing a little bit of weakness, that could be interesting going into tomorrow's session. Again, 428.59 is the level that I'm watching for support. In terms of the weekly chart, we still have quite a bit of room to the upside. Momentum massively bullish on the day. You can see we were up almost 2% on the SPY, which is a massive move. We're right at this dip low from this kind of double top consolidation that we had from mid-October. We need to break through that level as well as the 144 and 55 EMAs here. Get up to trend, that would be up around that 4,400 area. Right now, it still seems possible. Momentum is still very bullish. We're just getting that first tick of bullish momentum. Usually there's at least 2 or 3 of them. You can see that here, first tick, 2, 3, 4, and then here as well, 2, 3, 4, where we got some continuation off of that bullish move. It is worth noting that these 4 days have been super aggressive, but it does not mean that we can't continue a little bit higher from here. Moving over to the NASDAQ, very similar thesis. But look here in the after hours on that hourly chart, we did see a slight bit of bearish momentum. Does not mean that this is done by any means. Daily chart still showing us more bullish momentum to come, just like the S&Ps. In terms of ranges, you have the trend sitting up around that 371 area. You also have the previous high in that same zone. Certainly could see a move into that area. It does seem like we'll continue to see that rally. As long as the 21 EMA continues to hold here, which is currently sitting at 360.49, that is what I'm expecting. Levels for me, 361.58. We did come down and touch that level just barely here after hours on the Apple news. As long as that continues to hold, still watching for 364.84 seems possible, but a slight pullback tomorrow would not be shocking after these 5 days in a row of bullishness. Moving over to the Russell and the Dow, the same theme continues, bullish momentum, bullish RSI. We did get into overbought conditions here for the first time, which is interesting. 170.35 seems like an area where we might find some resistance. You can see this previous consolidation. The base of that consolidation was right here. We're now testing that. On the flip side, if it breaks here, holds that level, could be a nice little move higher. Typically, the first test of that 144 EMA is going to fail, so once we get into that zone, I would expect at least one rejection, establish a higher low, rally through if it's going to happen. We are above all the short-term EMAs here. Similarly, on the Dow, we're above all of the EMAs. Getting very close to that 200. In terms of structure, this actually looks the most bullish. And you can see that first test of the 144 we got here. Last time we tested it was all the way back in August and September. Got this big dip low. First test of the 144, pulled back, rallied up to it. Second test, and we broke through. The question is, will that hold? Can we get above 339.11? Hold that level and rally through. At this point, everything still looks bullish. You do have to keep that in mind, but we are overbought on the 4-hour chart. Massive move to the upside. And what happens next? You definitely have to pay close attention. Moving over to Apple and Tesla, you can see that big bar on earnings. Wicked all the way up to 181.80, almost to my level. Ended up breaking below both of these levels, and now we're closing right around that 172.60 area. Also wicked these lows, so now we're in that range. Question is, what happens now? Good question. Momentum starting to roll over. I would expect more bearishness if we end up closing after hours like this. That's a big bear candle, down about 3% on earnings. And with that weaker guidance, I would expect this to follow through down to that 165.71 area, which is not a great indicator for markets, especially the NASDAQ, which is so heavily weighted towards Apple. Tesla hit that 55 EMA, tested it. Again, first test typically fails. We're getting a pullback from that level. As long as it holds the 21 EMA down around 205, that could be interesting. It certainly could hold 214. I wouldn't expect it to, but if it does, you could trade off of that. Otherwise, 21 EMA at 205.74. Moving over to NVIDIA and ROKU. NVIDIA having another big bullish day, almost 3%, got right to the 21 EMA. Momentum continuing to tick towards bullish. I would expect more bullish days here from NVIDIA. Similar to this move, we're just right here where we're about to cross into that bullish momentum. We did get a little bit of a pullback. around that 21 EMA, and then we rallied through, continued to make new highs for a couple of days in a row there. Looking at ROKU just for a moment, this is a massive move, up 30%. We've been watching this one kind of intermittently on the channel, and it doesn't look like a great chart. Rallied up, got that initial test of the 200, pulled back, established the higher low like we talked about, ended up rallying through, made a much higher high. This is almost a double bottom, but it is technically a higher low at that 55-59 level. And that is not a new level. I just don't talk about ROKU very often, but it did happen to come right to the level I was watching. And sure enough, we got 4 days in a row, and then we just catapulted through this massive level on their really strong earnings with really strong guidance. Next level for me would be these previous highs up around 95, up to around 100. Moving over to staples and discretionaries, staples continues to rally. We took out this previous high at that 68.16 area, took out that trend line, watching that 144 EMA now at 68.84. Also have a level here at 68.91. Want to see it get above that and hold. Again, momentum bullish, RSI almost overbought. Would not shock me if we got a little bit of a pullback. We've basically been straight up from 65 to current levels. Not a crazy rally, but interesting. And I do think this could go either way. If we rallied up to the 200, I would expect some pullback from there. If we pulled back from here, it wouldn't surprise me either. Overall, I do think everything looks pretty bullish here on staples. Discretionary, similarly looking quite bullish. Broke through that 55 in the pre-market, rallied up to my level at 158.03. Interesting level. Very bullish momentum, bullish RSI, overbought conditions. Again, wouldn't shock me for a little bit of a pullback, but so far this looks good. Next one for me up around 162, and just behind that you have the 200 SMA at 162.73. Moving over to breadth, we have clear structural change here now. 50-day average right up to that 40 level, stopped right on top of it. This is now a higher low close from this previous high. So we have a low, high, higher high. Question is, can this continue from here, or are we going to pull back, establish a slightly higher low, and then rally through? Either way is possible. Remember, we're still waiting on this 200-day average to kind of materialize a bottom. So far, we've had a V-shape. Kind of reminds me of the beginning of October. Really strong V-shape, looked pretty clean, but there is always some kind of pullback. We had that initial test of the 55 EMA. Expected that to fail. Sure enough, it did. Now we got that second test, rallied through. But now on the 200-day average, we are moving up for that first test of the 55 EMA. Does seem like an area where we could fail at that 43.55 area, but momentum still very bullish. RSI still very bullish, so you do have to respect that. But 1, maybe 2 more days of bullishness, I would expect some kind of pullback, but not quite there yet. Moving over to the 2-year and the 10-year. 2-year actually had a pretty bullish day, up almost 1%, right off of this previous low, still in the same zone. Does look quite a bit weaker. We're right near that previous low, but we didn't get below it. 10-year, on the other hand, you can see we are establishing a low now. The question is, how low will it go? Can we get down to that 4.5 area at these previous lows? Will it touch the 55 EMA at 4.53? Momentum bearish, RSI bearish. As long as this continues to look weak, we should expect equities to be going higher, and the 10-year still looks very weak. Closed on the low yesterday, stacked another candle. Didn't quite close on the low, but certainly could have another candle from there. And like I said, I would like to see a test of that 55 EMA. Moving over to the dollar on the hourly and the daily. We talked about how this looked like a wick rejection on the daily chart. Looked like a double top on the hourly and then a pretty significant breakdown. We did get follow through on that move. Took out all the EMAs and SMAs on the hourly chart, which does not mean a ton right now because it is consolidating. You can see we've broken through that 200 SMA multiple times. This is just another iteration of that. We are not trending right now on the daily. And you can see that here, just chopping right here. Definitely seems like somebody is either entering or exiting a position. My guess would be an exit just because we saw this really strong move up into this zone. Now we're consolidating, waiting for that position to close all the way out. And then I would expect it to pull back here down to that 200 SMA around 103.50-ish. That would be interesting, and that should support equities. But we haven't seen it break that 105.50 level yet. We also have not tested that 55 EMA on the daily chart. Like I said before, first test usually holds. Get that initial test, get a bounce, establish a lower high, and then follow through off at that level. Moving over to bonds, look at these moves here. Bonds gapping up massively. JNK up over 1%, TLT up 2.25%, momentum very bullish, RSI very bullish on both charts. We haven't seen that for a very long time. We did almost see bullish RSI on this previous pop, but we are way above all of those EMAs now. We had kind of a consolidated bottom. We had a lot of volume in that area. And this does look more interesting on TLT now. JNK absolutely looks great. We had a move higher, pullback, slightly lower high, held that 9 EMA and 21 EMA, rallied up to the 55. Again, I would expect that first test to fail, pull back a little bit, maybe back down to the 89. That could be interesting. Hold that level and then rally through. But overall, this does look like the initial stages of a change of trend and a potential move back up into this range around 92 to 93. Moving over to volatility, move index sold off, makes sense. Bonds are going higher. This is also a significant breakdown. We took out this previous low, big move lower, held at the 144, moved right to the 55, stuck between there. If this level breaks, you would expect a much bigger push low, in my opinion. Looking at the VIX, we just pushed right through that 200. We talked about that yesterday being a potential area to hold. Did not happen, pushed right to my next trend line. You can see this is also the same bottom that we had here in mid-October. If it's going to bounce, you really would want to do it now. I know I kind of said that with the 200 SMA, but then we ended up cutting straight through it. At this point, you would have a double bottom. You would have some support from this longer term trend line. You can see we broke out from there. Retesting now. This would be the second retest of that trend line, just like we did here at that same level. And momentum is starting to roll over a little bit to the upside. Certainly interesting. VIX. And then you have the RSI. Also very oversold on the VIX. Kind of interesting. Obviously, this still looks very bearish. And it could absolutely continue lower. But this is an interesting level right in this 15-15 area. Moving over to my accounts, I did well. It says $600, but I think I was up only around $300. I'm not sure how that works here. But I did roll up my puts on the IWM. Did not capture nearly enough profit on that $4 move. Absolutely colossal move on the IWM. Should have been in a little bit sooner, but I was hesitating and it didn't work out for me. Looking at the Qs though, I did roll out and up my calls. $357 now for $7.50 credit. Tons of protection on that position. Like I said, I do think we'll see some kind of pullback. I don't know when, might be another day or two, but we will see some kind of pullback. Just have to be careful there. I sold some puts for the day. Those were profitable. Those expired worthless. I also sold some puts at $360 for tomorrow, 63 cents on those. After hours price down at $362, so should be okay. That's also below my level, so if the level drops, I'll just go ahead and take those off, as I already have my core position and lots of protection from that call. Overall, still a very bullish thesis. Everything looks good, but getting just a little bit extended on the shorter time frames. Let me know down in the comment section what you think of Apple earnings. Can the behemoth continue to grow, or have they finally stalled out at current levels? Definitely like and subscribe if you got any value out of this video. I make videos like this every single day, as well as Sundays, so hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Of course, none of this is financial advice. This is all for entertainment purposes. Good luck in your trading and have a great day.